Welcome to the Marketing Revolution podcast. This is the underground movement of savage marketers from all over the world. We are not Fortune 500 companies. We are real entrepreneurs with real businesses that have one major thing in mind: to set goals and devour them daily. Because we understand everyone wants to eat, but only savage marketers are willing to do the hunt. Now let's get this revolution started. Hey, what's up, everybody? John Hiley here with the Marketing Revolution podcast and the Marketing Savage Facebook group, coming to you today with another badass interview with my boy, the man, the myth, the legend, the man that kills shit, Sammie motherfucking Knight. How you doing today, Sammie?
I'm doing wonderful, and what an intro. You're a rock star. Thank you.
Hey, man, you know what, though? When I got somebody like you on the podcast, man, I got to let people know, right? Got to let people know because, you know, the thing about you, Sammie, there are like so many people that came to me and just said the words of advice and the things that you do to help them have transformed the way they think about themselves, which is super important, as you know. And it ultimately has transformed their business. I mean, you have a deep understanding, a deep knowledge. We talk a lot about energy on this podcast. We talk about becoming the best version of yourself. You know, this isn't just a typical marketing podcast where we talk about a bunch of nerdy shit. We talk about the core, the stuff that like really, really brings out that desire to turn you into that marketing savage so you can deliver your light, that light that we know each and every one of us has inside of us, so you can use that as a catalyst to deliver that light to the world. And man, you know, if there's anybody who I could think of that is doing that on a regular basis, nobody does it better than you, my friend.
Oh, you're kind. You're awful kind. You know, my father, I tell this story, and a lot of people kind of look at me like I'm wacko, but my father and I went to a funeral one time and went to the graveside. And as we were walking out, and I was probably 12 or 13. You know, when you're 12 or 13, you're not thinking about a whole lot of things, and you're not going to remember a whole lot. But I do remember this so vividly. And we were walking out, and there was a gentleman that my father knew that had passed, and his grave marker was there, and it said, you know, good father, good son, good all this. And my dad looked at me and said, you know, son, it's important while you're here that you're every one of those things. He said, but when you leave, the value is going to be all the knowledge you learn in your life and leaving it all here for somebody else to be just a little bit better. And man, that has stuck with me from day one of hearing it. And so I just want to share, you know, everything I did was either by accident, the wrong way, or I found myself in the middle of a situation and I had to figure out how to get out. I didn't have a book and I didn't have a pathway, you know, and so you just learn how to take the bruises and the licks and dust yourself off and go again. But that I think that's where I learned the most, is just this school of knocks, you know.
You know, I think you hit on something that's key, because a lot of people, they let the setbacks hold them down. And people who have that champion mindset, or who have been taught that champion mindset, because some people just don't even know it. You know, I was one of them people a long time ago. Like, I didn't know it when I just thought it was bad luck or bad fortune. Nowadays, when I get a setback, I'm like, man, this is the shit. This gives me an opportunity to reinvent myself. And each and every setback holds a seed of greater power in it. I even have a trampoline. I don't know if you know this about me, Sammie, and I got to buy one for my new offices, but of course we're in Texas now. Greatest state in the country, greatest country in the world, greatest country in the world, Texas.
That's right.
And so I had a trampoline in my office as a reminder every day to me and my employees to jump on it, so they understood that dip in that trampoline is literally the force that's holding you down is the force you need to propel you even higher, right? So that little dip in that trampoline, as the world tries to push you down, because it's going to push you down. Look, man, like the world, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, that like they're going to test you, right? They're going to test your faith. Do you have enough faith to continue walking through this shit, walking through this fire? Is the promise that's written on your heart strong enough to guide you through this? And it's the champions that continue walking in faith. And I believe, like, even biblically, that's why they talk about faith being so damn important, man. That's the belief in the unseen.
That's
right.
The
belief that God's doing something good, that God's working behind the scenes for you. And although this terrible travesty that you may be going through today, it's to clear out something better for the future.
Yeah, I look back and I use the analogy about a wedding. If you think about the bride and the groom and the family, at the last minute, there's always some chaos, some explosion, something. And you get to the wedding and it's 30 minutes long and it's absolutely magnificent. It's beautiful. Everything goes off without a hitch. And you go to the reception later and the bride and the groom and the mother of the bride and all this are talking about all the disaster that occurred. And so to me, when those setbacks hit me, it's telling me that this is going to be the right thing. This is going to be successful. And I'm being told that don't take your eye off the prize because it's going to work. And man, it's every time. Not sometimes. Every time. And that's
I was talking to a mentor about that, and we were talking about that day we were calling it jump and the net will appear. Like jump and just understand that net is going to appear. And when I was talking to him about it, he looked at me and he number one, I'll give you a little background. He's like one of the best copywriters in the world. It cost $100,000 for him just to write copy for your funnel. He's been my mentor, teaching me how to write copy for a long time. And he looked at me and said, we were talking about that jump, the net will appear. And he said, every time I've jumped, it's always appeared. So why would I stop jumping?
Yeah. That's the way I am. I get nervous if I'm going into the initiative or product launch or whatever it is. I get nervous if everything's perfect. Even though it may come off without a hitch, I start to get nervous. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be kicked in the head.
Oh, sorry. You must have got a call right there for a second.
Yeah, I did. I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. We heard you said you were supposed to get kicked in the head during a product launch.
I just feel like I'm supposed to because I can't be as successful as I plan to be if I don't get that quick jolt. And I think it's God telling me, all right, now don't go in there with blinders on. There's things that are happening on each side. So keep your eyes on it and live my life that way. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about some of you guys who don't know Sammie. You've been in the camouflage business for a long time. You're also in real estate. Let's talk a little bit about the business ventures you're involved in.
Oh, man. I was in the first thing I was in was of any learning was the food business. And I was in the processed pork business. So we sold hot dogs and bologna, man. That's like selling popcorn at the carnival. If you can do that, you can probably get away and do anything. I learned an awful lot in that environment. And then an opportunity came along to jump on board with a friend of mine that had started Mossy Oak. Toxie Hayes could be one of the smartest guys I've ever met when it comes to creativity. Guy was just brilliant and had an opportunity to have a minority ownership stake in it. And we took the business from a good business to a great place and a great business, and a lot of great people that worked with me and for me. And, I just had the best team in the world and traveled way more times than I wanted to overseas and stayed over there a whole lot more than I wanted to. And, but I learned so much. I learned about contractual law because I had to deal with all these contracts for licensing, and I learned about doing business in other countries and what's involved in sourcing and the traffic piece from country to country to get it to a shirt, or a pair of pants or a hat or whatever the case may be. And I had the pleasure there of working with 1,200 different companies and all these different categories. And I I burned my wheels out because I just stayed on the go, so much. But I got to be involved in every category you can think of, and every industry. Man, I dealt with automobile, I dealt with apparel, I dealt with footwear, headwear, I dealt with caskets.
Yeah. Oh, you went blank a little bit there, Sammie.
Am I back?
Oh, you're back. Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
sorry. These guys need to leave me alone. I don't know how to cut them off. But anyway, I just had the opportunity to look at all these different categories and understand how they operate their business, and each one of them had its own uniqueness, and and how do you go to market, and what's the true value of the marketing? How do you reach that consumer? And and just amazing product development minds that you can't fathom. I had the pleasure of working with 1,200 of them, and then taking a product to market. An idea like Toxie, he came up with this idea for camo, and he used a magic marker. It's a good story if you ever get a chance to read it, but he used a magic marker on the old woodland elliptical shaped camo, and he drew lines in it like bark on a tree. And from that, he took and he went out and he got sticks and limbs and leaves and dirt and put them in baggies. And he went to these different printers. Nobody's ever printed the color of a leaf,
Yeah.
at that time. And so he went to all these printers and he said, "Can you do this?" So that was just the treat of a lifetime. And then went overseas and spent a little time over there working with some guys, and lived over there for a while, and then got into real estate totally by accident. I was selling a piece of land, bought a piece of land. I was flipping it and cutting it into pieces, and hired the lady to do it. And she came, I was going to show her the property, and she came out there as a lady I've known all my life. And she had on a pair of high heels and a skirt and a blouse. I said, "Where's your boots?" She said, "Well, I don't have any boots." I said, "Well, I got to show you the land." She said, "Well, I'm not going to do it. You are." I said, "You're really terrible at this." And anyway, she brought me a client, and I showed the client. She came dressed the same way, didn't have boots. I showed the client who was dressed appropriately, and I told the lady, I said, the realtor, I said, "You need to sell me this because you're really bad at it. Careful what you ask for." She brought me an offer and a proposal, and I bought it. And I got in totally by accident. And I'm pretty good at getting into things totally by accident.
Right. So that's how you ended up getting into the Remax franchise.
Well, I got into Remax, and I got into real estate. It was an independent operator here in my hometown. And I went overseas to do this job with this guy over there, and help some other people. And while I was overseas, we didn't get a lot. I was living in Shanghai. We didn't get a lot of information about back here in the States, but we had one channel that we could get fair updates. And I kept hearing about this bubble. And my dad, high school educated, smartest man on the planet Earth, in my opinion. And so I called my dad and I said, "What's about this bubble?" And he said, "Well, housing market's going to crash." I said, "Man, I'm in real estate. I better start thinking about brands. You're in the branding business. I've been a brand fan forever, and brands are power and their strength. And in the franchise business, it's your big brother, And so I called this broker that I had in this independent office. And I said, "Dude, what's up with this bubble?" And he told me, he says, "A lot of people are afraid it's going to crash." And so I said, "Is there a brand available around there?" And he didn't know of anything other than Remax. It was an older gentleman. He was ready to retire. And this was on a Friday. And I told him, I said, "Get a hold of him and see if he can have lunch on Tuesday." And I was in China. He called me back on Saturday and said, "Yeah, we can have lunch, but we got to do it at 11 o'clock on Tuesday because he's got to leave, going to go on this vacation for about 2 or 3 weeks." I said, "I'll be there." So I flew back from China. Wife picked me up at the airport. I was 34 hours of being awake. Went straight to the lunch, had lunch with him, cut the deal, bought the deal, was back on the plane that night, headed back to China.
Jesus.
Man. And I bought the Remax, and the whole way back I'm going, okay, now I got 2 of them.
Yeah.
And put them together, and I learned everything backwards. I did it by, I always say I led with my chin. I stuck my chin out and said, hit it, go on and hit it. And so I merged the 2 together, and that was going to give me 20 agents. And I thought, man, everybody's going to like this. We'll have a little bit of strength. So I had this private meeting with, I had the independent group and I had the Remax group, and I'd flown back about a month later, and I brought them all together without telling either side, and told them what we were there for, and I was going to merge the companies. And I think I had 18 or 19 agents. 7 of them got up and left. 6 of them didn't even return my phone calls, just left. So no, not doing it. I'm like, golly, what did I do wrong? I hear about people getting knocked down. Ryan talks about it. You talked about it. What I do wrong? And I go back to what I said earlier. While I'm digging a hole because I want to go hide in it, all of a sudden, the biggest office in town sold, and some hotshot came in and started cutting secret deals with people. And this group of ladies heard about it. And so I reached out to one that I knew, trying to recruit. I'm trying to figure out how to make this thing break even. And I reached out to her, and she says, there's probably 7 or 8 of us that'll come. I said, get out of here. Why? And she told me, and I said, well, we'd love to have you. And just like that, man, I'm on top of the world. And during the recession, because it just started, during the recession, we had the only real estate office in town that grew. We grew both in agent count, and we grew in sales volume and gross commissions. And
wow.
I just go back to that and say, I get knocked back, and I think it's how we take on being knocked back. Like you said, if you're on that trampoline, you stay on the bottom, that's where you'll stay. But if you let that thing throw you back up, say, there's better things ahead. And I believe I did operate the way I did for so long that taught me get off your ass and go back after it,
Yeah.
So I'm living proof.
That's crazy how that happens. I know you probably haven't heard this story. I'll make it brief, but that's exactly kind of what had happened to me as well. Back in 2011, I pretty much had a lifestyle business before that. I was only working 4 days a week, was making a couple $100,000 a year. I was able to, take off to the zoo with my son and our family. We were able to, we did a lot of stuff, man. We were able to schedule off Mondays that we wanted to, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. And I just worked really hard 3 or 4 days a week, made a decent chunk of money. Well, all of a sudden in 2011, our area got hit with this massive hail damage storm. Oh. And literally, our phone lit up, and I've got 200 phone calls to return by the next day. All the people I know that have body shops are hitting me up, right? So I happen to be kind of already kind of trending in the industry. A lot of people knew who I was in that industry. So I'm looked at as the guy to start staffing everything, right? To get the people in, because that year there was hail all over the country. And so it was my job to continuously recruit people to come in. And we ended up renting out. You remember Dayton Wire Wheels?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we ended up renting out. At that time, back in the Dr. Dre days, Dayton Wire Wheels was big. They had a big factory, right? And about the time we came in, they were using about half of their factory. So we ended up renting out the other half, was probably the equivalent of about the size of a football field. And by probably 7 days, we had about 120 cars in that building. And I couldn't keep people there. So staff would come in, people would come in, and they had so much hail that year, their town would get hit with hail and my whole crew would leave. And then another crew would come in and they would leave, and another crew, and it just kept happening over and over and over again. So it was like about a month and a half into this thing, and I'm just turning people. We're bringing in people, we're losing people. We're bringing in people, we're losing people. I'm at my wits' end. I'm like, man, I just came from like a lifestyle business of where I was like maxing and relaxing, doing what I wanted to do, right? And now I'm thrown into this pit of hell where people are calling me all the time, wondering where their cars are and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, man, this is freaking terrible. It like turned into a nightmare, right? And when I was at about my wits' end, I was like, you know what? I'm not giving up on this. I'm like, I am not giving up on this. And all of a sudden, something came over me. It's almost like, you ever sit there and have a serene feeling? You could just be standing there looking at the wind blowing through a tree. And then all of a sudden you have this feeling of peace that just comes over your entire body from your head down to your toes.
Been there.
This serene feeling came over me from my head to my toes. And I looked around, everything looked different. My internal dialogue just changed that second. And I said, you know what? Like, why am I worrying about this? Like, why am I letting this like destroy my life pretty much? I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do kind of like we had Tom Ziegler on the show not too long ago. I did what Tom Ziegler did. I said, here's my list of shit that I can do. And guess what? Everything else, that's on God. I'm giving that up to God. You know what? I'm going to let the stuff that I can't control, that's God right there. And as soon as I let go and what I call surrendered, immediately things changed that day. Immediately. And it was through all these weird little chinks. Like, I got a phone call from this guy because this random dude gave him a card in a hotel. Their whole crew came in. They were my crew for the entire year. And like all these, like that day. And I was, it was almost to the point to where I was unrecognizable to people that had been dealing with me that previous month. So I had a couple guys that stayed full time with us. And I remember walking up to one of the guys and he looked at me and goes, man, you look different today. And he was a full-blooded Indian too, full-blooded Indian. And, he had that power of the energy, right? He looked at me, he's like, you look something different about you today, man. He's like, I don't know what's going on, right? And I'm just like, it's good, man. And everything changed in that moment.
Isn't that amazing? And sometimes we got to get the hell knocked out of us to let it come over us.
You're right.
I've been down that path. Good for you. Yeah. You're in the automobile body repair business. I had a neighbor one time, cool dude, long hair, hippie. And he always worked in his garage and you could never go in there. It was kind of weird, and he was from up north. And one day I just happened to catch him outside. I'm knocking on the door and I'll go over there to him. And I'm knocking on the door. And I'm like, dude, I just want to say hello. What are you doing here? Great guy. He said, well, come on. Just, I got my mind on it. He used to be in the body shop business and had a little trouble with some recreational pharmaceuticals and got himself in a bad sight. So this dude starts designing toys. And Flexible Flyer, one of the biggest names there is, he's designing all their plastic toys. And he's building them the same way build bodies on cars. It was so cool just watching this guy. And the same thing happened to him. He got knocked to the ground, dude. And he said, I got to get away from this drugs and I got to get away from this automobile stuff. Next thing you know, he's a toy designer. Awesome guy.
No, that's it. That's incredible, and what I've learned over time, you got to be on the lookout because continuously in your life, like that can happen over and over and over again. But as you know, the struggle is what makes you stronger. Are you with us, Sammie?
I am sorry. If I can ever get the internet out of my house, I'd be on the computer. So my apologies.
Man, I'm surprised you ain't got a satellite made just for you.
Well, we're getting this new thing out of my house called fiber.
Okay.
And, we're pretty excited about it because everything else doesn't work worth a hoot. Anyway, go ahead.
Hey man, that's gonna run extremely fast. So you kind of remind me of I grew up around just a bunch of good old boys. Like literally my when I was a kid, it was like a big thing for us to have. My dad owned a little car dealership. outside of town.
Mm.
And we would have fish fries and
Oh.
man, that was what we do over the weekend. In fact, my dad was actually running a legal gambling ring inside of that place. And my brother, he get paid $100 a night to watch out a peephole on the front door to make sure, like, any cops would pull up, they could shut the place down real quick and get back to their fish fry. And then he was collecting house money, so house would take 10% of everything that went through there. And man, I just remember the good old times hanging out with the good old boys. And I mean, they would go fish. So all the fish that we were eating was fish that was like caught that day and brought in that day. Let me ask you something, man. You ever eat any? I call this hillbilly caviar. You ever have hillbilly caviar?
I have, and we have another name for it. And if I think I'm on the right track, say what it is.
Deep fried fish eggs, like when they get the fish sack out of the.
I have. We have a little. We call it redneck caviar. So.
See, I was raised by hillbillies though, because my dad was from Kentucky.
Hey, look, I was born in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Maybe while we're brothers, I don't know, but
they call my dad was born in Salt Lick.
Oh, really? I was born in a little town named Princeton. Still got the same population it had when I was born 63 years ago.
Wow. Apparently, they got Hiley everything in Salt Lick. They got, I guess, my Uncle Red owned the whole town when he was. He had a Hiley's laundromat. He had Hiley's grocery store. He even had my dad said back then he had a parakeet store. So he brought in the parakeets, and he told me all kinds of stories about this guy. He apparently had the sawmill too. Had Hiley's sawmill. And he was one of them guys, like, he seen all the sawdust and he couldn't stand seeing everybody throw it away. He said, he'd mix it into concrete. He'd try anything to sell this sawdust. And Dad said he ended up, I guess back then, and I mean, you can tell me, Dad said that they would sprinkle the sawdust on the school floors at the end of the day, and people would sweep it up the next day. So he started bagging it and selling it to these schools.
I'll be darned. My first job, real kind of job during school, was working in a meat market, and we used to put sawdust down on the floor of that meat market to soak up all the the oils and stuff that fall out of the meat that you're in there processing. Sawdust a magic cure, if you want to know the truth.
I think they ought to make a cologne that smells like sawdust, man. Because there ain't nothing better smelling than sawdust.
Just kind of put a little bit behind your ear, right?
Yeah, I was telling the wife that the other day. I'm like, man, because she bought me some cologne that smells like leather. She's one of them women. She starts smelling leather, so I'm always trying to smell like leather. Yeah. I'm trying to leather up. She found me a cologne that smells just like it. So now when I put it on, she's, what are you wearing? Oh, okay.
I'm
like, I'm gonna have to keep that stuff.
I gotta tell you something about you and your wife.
Yeah.
When I kind of spoke to both of y'all at the Apex, and started watching y'all, and then we went to the MDM, and y'all were across the room from me, and I'd look over and take a glance. And I had a guy tell me this one time, and it's probably one of the proudest things that I've had told to me. I had a guy that used to work for me, and he came in one time. He's a little inebriated, and he was really angry and hostile and was going to come after somebody. And so I kind of caught him and took him outside, and we talked, and he finally said, he said, you know what I really want? He said, I want to have a woman in my life that looks at me like your wife looks at you, and you look at her. And I since that time, I watch it. I see that, because look, I've been married forever, but I probably didn't do everything perfect. No, I know I didn't. But my wife is strong as a rock. But I watched the two of y'all, and I said, now, I really gravitated to y'all because I just liked your energy. And if you were in my town and you and I were out having lunch, and all my buddies came up, and they'd go, that dude, the guy you were with, he had a lot of tattoos, didn't he? I'm like, yeah, he's the coolest dude you ever been around. You and I are totally probably different, but identical at the same time.
I know, isn't that crazy?
yeah, you look at your wife and she looks at you, and y'all have a relationship that's incredible. And you can see it just by that looking at each other, and you know that y'all been through hell, but you did it together.
Yeah.
And now you're on the other side of it. And that is something that you should, and I know y'all do, but you should really take a tremendous amount of pride in that, because that ain't easy.
And Sammie, I appreciate that as well, my friend. But I kind of look at it like this, like with my dad, I was raised by my grandparents. My father was in prison when I was born, and then my mother, she was only 16, so she kind of like took off, and I was left with my grandparents. So they adopted me. So my dad was much older, so he would have been my grandfather, but I called him my dad because they adopted me at a very young age, right? I was like 6 months old. And man, I got the chance to grow up and see what an old school relationship really looked like. Today people are so willing to just give up on each other.
Yeah.
They just, like, anything goes wrong. I'm looking at, like, my dad used to, they used to jump out. They had to sneak out because my mom would come walking the back door. She'd look to check to make sure he was still in the garage. Then she'd come back and sit down, watch TV. And then 10 minutes later, right? So they had to plan it. They had to have one of his friends watching the door, and her face would come up. And they see her face disappear. So they knew she was walking. All right, boys, let's go. They had to push his, he had an old station wagon that had cherry bombs on it. And so they couldn't start it up right there. They had to push the son of a bitch down the street and jump in it and take off downtown for the night. And, he'd come back in, half lit. My mom would be mad, right? Of course my mom would be mad.
She knew he wasn't going to do it.
Yeah, of course my mom would be mad, but it wasn't nothing to get divorced about.
Yeah.
They still loved each other. My mom would be mad for a couple days, and he'd do that about once every 2 months or something like that. And back then, that was the thing. Men could just blow off steam, and women didn't have to say, "Oh, he fucking left me one night, I'm getting a divorce," right? It's just
my dad absolutely cherished the ground my wife walked on.
Yeah,
he loved my wife, and I don't really want to say I wasn't bright. I was really stupid a lot of times. And one time I was out all night, and I came in. I'd been out with my buddies, and I was totally blistered. Got up on the bar at my parents' house, and my wife was so mad, and she was just chewing on me, and I was still so tore up, inebriated. And my dad eased up there to her, and he said, "Honey, you come on back over here and sit down, because if I was you, I'd divorce this worthless piece of shit." My dad said that right there to me. And then another time, my wife, we were supposed to go out on our 3rd anniversary. We're going to dinner. And I went out to happy hour with some buddies, boy, and just got hammered in about 30 minutes. Couldn't even walk up the stairs to get my wife to go to dinner. She was so mad. She threw me in the car and took me home to my parents' house and pulled up in the driveway and honked a horn. I was in the passenger seat. I was so blistered. I was in the passenger seat, and my mother turned the front porch light on, opened the door, and my mother said, "What do you need?" And my wife said, "I'm bringing this worthless bastard back. Open the door and just let me fall out like a minnow that was about to die in the driveway, dude." I watched the tire go by my head, and as she's backing up, my mother said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I don't want him anymore. You keep him." And my mother said, "I don't either," and shut the door. I'm left out there laying in the driveway. My wife brings me home, and my mother doesn't even want me back.
All my troubles that came from alcohol. We actually broke that down. My mom told me that when I was younger. She said, she'd look at me, she'd say, "Son, that is all of your trouble comes from that one thing right there." Every fight that I've ever been in, every time I've ever been to jail has had it involved. And I know you probably know my story a little bit, Sammie, but we quit drinking for about 10 years, 8 to 10 years. I just had to. I was an alcoholic, when we started the business, and we got good. We got good. We got some success under our belts and thought we could pick it up again. And well, she was fine. But what happened to me was like I drank every 2 weeks, and then next thing you know, it became every weekend. And then next thing you know, every Saturday night became every Saturday and Sunday. And then next thing you know, we do margarita Monday, thirsty Thursday, tequila Tuesday, like every day had like, and little by little, it just became an everyday thing again. It just worked its way up to that. It's the way I am with alcohol.
Yeah.
And and then I ended up because I was still very successful. I'd done very well at plenty of events and things like that. I didn't have that negative shit like telling me that I was going down the wrong path, even though I was. And it literally took, and I know some of you guys already heard the story, so I won't go over it, but it took me getting the dog shit beat out of me by the Dayton police, pulled me out of my Corvette, tased me 17, 18 times, put a nightstick into my face a couple hundred times probably. Woke up in the MRI machine, didn't know what the hell happened, thought I wrecked my car and killed somebody, and was actually happy to hear that I got beat up by the police because I didn't kill anybody. And I'm wondering why I'm handcuffed to the rail. Yeah. And thankfully, I'd already done enough stuff for my community because I'd probably be in prison right now if it wasn't for the amount of stuff that I'd already done for our community. Because when they found out that I was the guy who was having the Dents for Kids charities, and I was the guy who was really, quite generous to our community over and over and over again, it helped me out in the long run. You know what I mean? They said this was a one-time mistake. And it also woke me up. It woke me up, and it said, man, like I can't drink alcohol. I just can't. I could do it here and there, and it just will continue to snowball into an everyday thing. And
isn't that cool? Through all the crazy, you still found time to give. Isn't that amazing? As crazy as we were, we still tried to give it back. What could we have done if we didn't do some of the crazy stuff?
I know, right? I know. Well, my whole thing with our Dents for Kids charity was like, I remember when I first started my business, Sammie, with the automotive business, we didn't really have the money to buy gifts. So I always talk about, we went down to the Dollar General store and bought my son that you just seen here sitting beside me. We bought him a bunch of gifts there when he was like 2 years old. And, instead of G.I. Joe, I bought like G.I. Jack. Yeah. Or instead of like Hot Wheels, I bought like Cold Wheels, or, whatever. Like it was like it was just like, I mean, it was some stuff that I just felt, I was like, man, I can't really afford to spend much money on Christmas. I'm like, this is like unacceptable. We just started the business, and it was like the first couple years, and I still hadn't caught on. I was very young at the time. And I said, you know what? When this thing takes off, we're gonna have gifts for all the children, like people that can't afford. Because a parent can be a piece of shit, like absolute piece of shit, but that's not who their child. That's not their child, man. They got to live with that stuff. So the people that I have empathy for are children and dogs and animals. You know what I mean? Like that's the two.
We had a lot in common. That is so cool. The challenges that you've come through and the commitment that you've made, you didn't have to do that. You could have been out there on the bottom of the barrel and just stayed there. But there's, and I say this about leaders, I hear people ask all the time, it's, well, how do you make a leader? And how do you teach someone to be a leader? You don't teach that. Everybody has it. It is in there. I view our responsibility is to pull it out. We have to show them how to get it out. I'll tell you a little story, and what you did shows the leadership that's in there. Something got it out. Your grandparent or your parents, your whatever it was, something got it out. And I was in the food business, and I was running a promotions area, and I went to this older gentleman that was a regional manager, and I had started a deal back in the day. We had cassette tapes, so we would do our upcoming promotions on a cassette tape, a little Memorex deal. We'd send it out to all the salesmen, and they could listen to what's coming while they're driving down the road, and I was inside marketing. And I just didn't like the old dull, today we're going to talk about hot dogs and a 50-cent coupon that'll drop in Sunday's roto ads. Who the heck's going to listen to that? So I put a little music behind it. Yeah. Before you get in trouble for it. So I had Marvin Gaye and heard it through the grapevine, and I was the grapevine tunes, telling the stories. I was really trying to have fun with it. people would call me and go, man, that's awesome the way you got that cassette and the promotion. Nobody talked about the promotions. I didn't think about it. Okay. And so I'm with this older gentleman one day during a sales meeting. I was kind of keyed up. I said, well, what do you think about the promotions tips I'm sending out? He said, oh, that's okay. I'm thinking, no. He should be as excited as I am. And I said, Don, his name's Don Ross. I said, what do you think about it? He said, you know, I'm going to tell you something and you may not like it. I said, okay. He said, this whole company has seen you grow and they see you here. And that tape and the way you do it puts you here. Man, I was so pissed when I walked away. I'm like, that old guy, he don't know nothing. Next day when I woke up, I went, that guy's taking the time to tell me, raise my game. And I look back at all these things that people like that did for me, and they taught me how to raise my game. But what they taught me how to do was reach in here and pull that leadership skill out. They didn't teach me how to be a leader. They said it's in there, and I take it out. Same thing with you, dude. You got it, and you took it out, and you're continuing to do that. And the way you lead your family, and the way you enjoy life, but somebody helped you get it out. And if I can help others do that, we win.
Mm-hmm. We do. We do, because we're always going to be held back by the people that we leave behind. I don't think society realizes that. And I don't mean like leave behind by, kind of like that whole feed the animal thing so they become dependent. I'm talking about leave behind, like teaching men how to fish. You know what I mean? And teaching the things that because I look back, like I didn't know anything about success. Like I still remember the day when I was sitting there, like in tears. I was sitting there wondering, like, why is all of this negative shit just going through my head all the time? Like I feel I'm in pain all the time. And I remember opening up a Stephen Covey book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I started reading that book, and I had never heard anything in my entire life like that. Like nobody around me in my entire life had taken the time to tell me, or they didn't know themselves. The people I was surrounded with didn't know themselves. There was a different way to think. There was a different way to live your life. And there are a lot of people, we take that for granted. I call that like it's like the knowledge curse, the curse of knowledge. Like when we know something, we think that everybody knows this one thing. Well, no, they don't. There's millions of people out there that have no idea how to live a good, productive life. They all want it. Everybody wants it. Everybody has that same desire inside of their heart. They just don't have the knowledge to make that decision. And I'm sure God gives them signs all the time. God's always working in their heart and their mind. God's always trying to take them towards the right path, move them in that direction. That I do believe. But I also believe that we can be a catalyst to that, And I'm a testament. Arthur, who's in here, he's probably going to listen to this later. He came to me and he told me, he goes, I'm from inner city Dayton, and my dude here is from inner city Dayton. They came up and I signed a bunch of books for him. Long story short, he worked for a guy who did some work for me before I sold my house. And then they came up the last weekend. I realized Arthur wasn't here, so I wrote him on Facebook. I said, dude, I'm leaving, man. You need to bring your books up here, get them signed. So he ended up dropping everything. He came up there, got the books up, got them signed. And when I was talking to him, he's like, man, like you just don't hear people talking the way that you talk. Like I'm a member of your group now. I'm following you on Facebook. Like people in my community, he said they don't want to teach anybody anything because they're afraid that the other person is going to get ahead of them. And, he said like when they know something and they learn something, they just don't want to share it. They're literally afraid their neighbor is going to get ahead of them. And so there's that spirit out there where people, instead of operating under a creative force, an abundance force, knowing that, God gives us like everything that we need. All right. We are the creators. That car that you're sitting in there right now, that car that you're sitting in, Sammie, was once in a fucking mountain.
That's right.
It was in a mountain. Okay. So I mean, I mean, we have the ability to create. Everybody has the ability to walk and live in abundance. It's been given to us. I believe
Yeah,
it's the force that we're fighting against. It's the force we're fighting against. And as a
yeah,
civilization as whole, like, we're never going to move to where we need to go. I
yeah,
believe there's a time where politicians wouldn't even be needed.
yeah. You
If
talk
every
about the gentleman that you just mentioned about how they're afraid that somebody will one up them.
Yep.
I went to work for a company, and when I interviewed with the VP of sales, um, older gentleman, and he said, "What do you want out of this job?" I said, "I want your job." And he laughed and he said, "Oh, there's a lot of people that wanted my job, but I've been here a long time, son. You'll never get my job." And I busted my tail and did a lot of crazy things and did a lot of good things and had a lot of people that took the time to say, "Hey, let me help you go through that," like that Don Ross guy. "Let me help you get where you're going." I ended up being that guy's boss. And I'll never forget what he told me. He said, "I am so proud of you." He said, "A lot of people wanted to do it, but they never did it. You did it." And he said, "Now I want to tell you the greatest compliment you can be given in business is to one day manage the person that taught you." And he said, "You're getting to do it." I'll never forget that. Unbelievable.
Man, that's incredible. That's an incredible story, Sammie.
Cool deal. So we always have to pass it on, like my dad
We
said.
do.
Give
And
it
it's
to
good that he recognized that, though. It's good that he recognized that.
them.
I truly believe that I'm always in the creative mindset. That's why I try to operate. I know anytime I'm operating scarcity, like, I know that I'm going in the wrong direction. So I do a lot of things, as many people have read my book. I do a lot of things to stay in that abundant state of mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I truly believe that, and I talk about this in the book, that when you get in an abundant state of mind, everybody is actually seeking increase and they are trying to avoid decrease. Like, all the time, all day long, we're seeking some form of increase. That can be increase of love, that could be increase of monetary money, that could be increase of time, that could be increase of, we're all seeking increase and we're trying to avoid decrease. I have a firm belief that if you can fill yourself and you can convince yourself, not only you can actually convince yourself that you are a man of increase. And when people just associate with you alone, that they are going to get increase for themselves. So by association, when people come into your world, you believe in the depth of your heart that you are going to bring increase into their life. People will see that unconsciously. You don't have to say it. You don't have to say a fucking word. You got to walk in the room, radiate it, know that you're there to help. But if you were thinking in lines of scarcity, everybody would want to get away from you,
Yeah.
because nobody wants that decrease. And
Yeah.
I believe that, like, there's small things you can't fake, like mannerism, the way you stand, the way you talk, the way that you immediately respond when somebody talks about a win. It took me a long time for this too, Sammie. I was inclined when I was at the beginning, I was inclined to be jealous. I was inclined to have these thoughts in my mind, like when somebody talked about like a Lamborghini, I'm looking back 20 years ago as a kid, I'd be jealous and why am I not there yet? These type of things, right? What I started doing is I started speaking people's success because I knew I couldn't really change my thoughts, right? But I knew if I started speaking their success into the world, I started saying, "You know what, man? I love it. I love what you're doing." And I started speaking it. The word is so fucking powerful that as you speak that, your thoughts will fucking follow.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
now it's a beautiful thing. Like, because when somebody tells me about a win, like, I try to be the happiest person in the room for them. I really do.
Oh, yeah. You and me both. I had a friend that reached billionaire status, and I immediately picked up the phone, called him, said, "Dude, I'm just so proud of you." And he said, "Well, why are you calling me?" I said, "Because I'm proud of you." And he said,
Yeah.
"Well, most of the people that I worked with and grew up with haven't reached out to me." And I said, "I'm excited for you, man. I think it's the greatest thing that you've reached that pinnacle." And he said, "What's interesting is since I reached that pinnacle, most people are trying to reach in my pocket, not reach in my heart. And I think we have to reach in everybody's heart. I don't care what's going on."
You're right. No, you're 100% right. Yeah, that's an incredible thing, Sammie. Incredible thing, my friend. So, well, we are about 48 minutes into the podcast, my man. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up. I believe that seeing all the comments here in the Facebook post, so everybody's loving the knowledge that you was dropping. People are laughing about your story as well of the tire driving past your head when your wife kicked you out of the car and just left. And your mom said, "No, I don't want him either. Tell them to go sleep out in the yard. Watch out for the sprinklers when they come up." You know.
Hey, John, I want to say this though before you wrap up, and I know there's people that are listening, and there's more that will, but I can't tell you what an honor it is to have met you and to have met Angela and see the two of you. I feel like you meet people all your life, and you meet some that you feel like you've known them all your life, and I feel so much like that because to see what you're doing and what you've done and the platforms that we have today, man, if I'd have had this 30 years ago, holy cow. and the opportunity that's ahead, but one, to be asked to be on your podcast is such an honor, but to be able to say that's my friend is quite an honor. Great
Sammie,
job.
we feel the exact same way about you, my friend. Man, we talk about you all the time, and shoot, me and Thomas, we were talking about you the other day. Thomas told me that when you first met Thomas, and that's why I introduced you by you're the guy who kills shit, because Thomas said the very first introduction to you and him when they went to Cabo, you walked up to, "Hey, my name's Sammie Knight. I kill shit."
I do.
Yeah, man. Hey, you know what? Everybody likes to eat, right? You know,
right.
and
Right.
Guess what? Man, this has been an incredible interview, Sammie, and I am most certain that people are going to have their lives changed by this one, my friend. And on that note, we'll go ahead and bounce on out of here. Is there any links or anywhere that people can connect with you?
Reach out to me on Facebook, DM me. Just send me a note and I'll send you everything. That's the best way.
Yep. And for any of you podcast listeners, that is SammieKnight over there on Facebook. And anyhow, y'all, I appreciate you guys for coming along on this Marketing Revolution podcast. And again, Sammie, I appreciate all the knowledge you dropped here today, my friend. And as usual, we'll see you on that next one.
Thank you.